Mr. Jokum, thank you for farming. My grandfather farmed from 1926 to 1960. He was a grain farmer on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Thank you for growing our country's food. I want to talk to you a little bit about family farms. Now, my understanding is that in this budget, it would increase the lifetime capital gains exemption on the sale of family farms from $1 million to $1.25 million. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And I understand that also when you sell a farm, you also can benefit from the principal residence deduction, meaning that you can eliminate entirely from capital gains your home and 1.24 acres in addition, so that's completely tax-free. Are you aware of that, sir?
Yes, I am. However, it doesn't always work that way in family farm transfer. And that's what I'm really concerned about. Our daughter came back from working in the ag industry, and we're in a process of family farm transfer. And this new tax will add a lot of tax
that's what I'm trying to explore.
implications.
Now, I know that when we put assets in joint ownership, then that property passes it simply would avoid tax and disposition at all. Could you put could you add your daughter's name as a joint owner to the farm and avoid that disposition entirely?
That I'm not sure of. I would have to check that out with my accountant.
Okay.
And we're working on that. I am a farmer, not a tax lawyer.
Of course, no, I appreciate that.
I did call him before this meeting here today, and he said, absolutely, it will increase my tax burden going forward.
So just two other quick questions. I understand, and we'll get into this with another witness on stacking. If you were passing your farm to 3 children, each of those children could add cumulatively their capital gains exemptions. Were you aware of that, sir? You maybe only have the one daughter, is that right?
No, we have 4 daughters, but
so
it's only the one daughter that's interested in farming.
Right. But if you were to transfer your farm to 4 of your children, are you aware that those 4 people can cumulatively stack their capital gains exemptions? So in this case, it would be a total of $5 million of lifetime exemption.
Right. So I was not aware of that. However, spreading it out to non-farming family members, like the other kids, is a pretty surefire way of destroying the family farm.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting your personal situation. I'm talking about just the structure of it. Finally, I don't know if you're aware, but when capital gains were imposed in this country or brought in this country in 1972, the rate was 50%. In 1988, the Mulroney Conservative government raised it to 66.6%. And in 1990, they raised it again to 75%. Today, this proposal would actually bring it back to the 50% rate that still was in place in 1972, but raise to 66.6% only on that amount over $250,000. Are you suggesting, sir, that we should go back to the 1972 rates in this country?
I'm suggesting that this budget is not fair to generational to multi-generational farms. And my farm is my retirement. Just like Mrs. Stefanik said, I don't have fancy RSP because I invested everything into my farm. And now I get penalized for doing that versus you yourself or some of my other kids who have very good jobs, pay into an RSP, their employer pays into an RSP, and yet they do not face this tax increase.
Well, sir, you will be left with 33% of your capital gain is still tax-free. So you'll still retain that benefit. Mr. Stanford, can you please explain the stacking, the way that stacking might work under this new provision? I'll give you an example. Many people are concerned how this might affect a second property, rental property, a second home. In the case of couples where secondary residence is 50% owned by each spouse, each of them is entitled to $250,000 exemption, making a $500,000 exemption. Same thing with the farm. Can you explain that to us?
Well, since the capital gains on the individual personal tax return is defined according to each individual, not according to a family or a household, that's how our tax system works, then each individual claiming a capital gains will be able to access all of those exemptions and thresholds. So that includes the 1.25 million lifetime exemption for farms and small business, could go to each member of a family, and then the annual $250,000 threshold before you move into the 66% inclusion rate could also be claimed by each member of family. So a good example would be a cottage. We hear a lot about cottage owners and a cottage that's in the family. Well, if it is in the family and owned jointly, then that $250,000 threshold could apply each year for each individual in the family. On top of that, we of course have a bit of an income averaging system in our capital gains system, the capital gains reserve, which generally will allow you to average out one-time capital gains over 5 years, or in the case of passing property to your children, even longer. So the stackability across members of a family and the potential for averaging over multiple years means that most people with a second home are going to be able, I think, to avoid the 66% inclusion rate entirely and continue to pay capital gains at the existing 50% rate.
Thank you, MP Davies. That's the time. Members, we're moving into our second round of questions. Times are a little bit different in this round, and we're starting with MP Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I'll just start by just correcting a little bit of incorrect tax advice that Mr. Davies offered from the floor here. Number one, simply by putting in a property...
Point of order, I wasn't giving tax advice, just to be clear.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Davies. Simply by putting something in joint tenancy does not avoid, or putting someone joint name, it actually triggers the tax at that point. And in fact, stacking would work for the next generation, which means his kids could multiply the capital gains exemption, but he cannot unless his wife also owns the corporation. So just I would strongly advise that Mr. Davies maybe perhaps review the tax law before he starts making commentary. Now, I'm also struck by the fact that we have a series of individuals who get their money either from government or are tenured or otherwise, who are making pronouncements about the lives of business owners. And we actually have business owners here who directly contradict what they've said. And I think anyone at home would be well aware of the facts here. We've heard from a tenured professor that no, this won't discourage business investment. We've heard from business owners that, in fact, it will reduce tenure, or that it will reduce their investment in businesses. This is costing people jobs. This is costing people real lives. This is hurting people financially. Mr. Joachim, my first questions will be for you, sir. You talked a little bit about the effect of the tax changes. I want to go back a little bit. And first of all, if you don't mind sharing me, does your family farm pay carbon tax?
Yes, we do. We pay, there are certain segments that are exempt, but there's a lot of hidden carbon tax that's paid. About 75 to 85% of what I produce is exported, and it is transported on the Canadian rail system, either CP or CN, and they pay carbon tax on the fuel that they use, and they do pass it on to the farmer. The same with the grain elevators that receive our grain, and anything they use within their system and adds cost, that would be the carbon tax, is again passed on to the farmer. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of hidden carbon tax that we pay that is not a line item within our bookkeeping, but it is there. So and APAS did a great study out of Saskatchewan as far as how much carbon tax we pay, and it's staggering.
Thank you very much. And so now this Liberal government is adding insult to injury to farmers. So in addition to the thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars of carbon tax, they're now increasing the capital gains inclusion. And the capital gains inclusion from the advice that you've received from your tax professionals is that it will increase your tax burden and make it more difficult to pass a family farm onto your daughter. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. My farm is my retirement, and a family transfer, farm transfer, is a very difficult job to do to satisfy everyone's need within the family. My parents moved from Germany to Canada in 1980. We had a very small farm in Germany. We bought a smaller than average size farm here in Manitoba back in 1980. And I came back from university to the farm in 1984. And on the advice of my accountant, I did pay a little bit into RSPs, but he said, you know, you're better off investing in your farm because you want to grow it where the farm is financially viable to support your family. And so we have grown it over the last 44 years into a larger than average size farm, which supports 3 households at the moment. We have done that when I was married. We lived for 12 years in a house, had very little furniture, made lots of sacrifices to grow the farm. And we grew the farm not in order to sell it at the end of my farming career and live in luxury with the millions. No, we grew
Thank
the
you,
farm.
sir. Thank you.
that
I'm
we
just running out of
pass it
time.
on.
I'm running out of time. And
Right.
I would like to just seek unanimous consent for this committee to agree that farmers and plumbers should be exempted from the capital gains legislation.
I'm not saying unanimous consent.
No one said no.
No one said no.
Who said no? Who said no?
Unanimous consent that farmers, union members, and plumbers be exempt from the capital gains inclusion increase. That this commitment makes such a commitment.
It's a motion.
Juicy.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. Is that a motion that we would need notice for?
I'm asking for unanimous consent.
I'll
Still a
just
motion.
suspend for a second. Yes, you can ask for unanimous consent. No. Oh, okay. We'll continue.